One second, Ethan Vale was dying in a staged car crash. The next second, he shot awake in his old factory office, lungs burning, fists clenched, heart pounding like it wanted to break through his ribs. There was no blood, no crushed steering wheel, no cold mountain road, only an old Lenovo computer, stacks of messy shipping orders, and the faint roasted smell of the small agricultural processing factory he had built with his own hands. Ethan froze. This was Kinksy Town, his office, his factory, and when he grabbed his phone, the date on the screen nearly stopped his breathing. July 12, 2020, 11:45 at night. He had come back to the day before his so-called brother Victor Shaw and his ex-girlfriend Selena Cross murdered him on Panshin Highway. In his last life, Ethan had trusted Victor with sales and clients. He had trusted Selena with the company finances. He treated one like family and the other like the woman he would marry. And the reward for that trust. Victor stole his client channels. Selena drained his accounts. Then the two of them arranged an accident that sent Ethan and his delivery van flying off a cliff. Even now, he could still see Victor's cruel smile through the shattered windshield. He could still hear that disgusting farewell. Go in peace. We'll take good care of the factory and the money. Ethan's eyes went cold, but then another memory struck him harder than the crash. His parents. In this timeline, his mother and father had already been hit by an out-of-control farm tricycle. They were lying in the tiny Kinksy Town Health Center, injured, undertreated, and waiting for money Ethan no longer had. In his last life, Victor and Selena used the factory's cash crisis as an excuse to delay treatment. By the time Ethan died, his parents had also followed him into tragedy. Not this time. Ethan opened his banking app. Available balance, 250.3 yuan. For a second, the number looked almost funny. 250 yuan. Barely enough to buy snacks and regret. He had been reborn, but he was still broke. Selena had already emptied the accounts. Victor had already spread rumors that the factory was collapsing. No one in town would lend him enough money for a city hospital deposit. Rage boiled in his chest. Then deep inside his mind, a cold mechanical voice suddenly rang out. Ding. Regional population wealth system bound successfully. Ethan went still. The system explained the rule with terrifying simplicity. Every day at midnight, it would calculate the permanent population of the region Ethan was in and transfer him 1 yuan per person. Current region, Kinksy Town. Permanent population, 41,259 people. At first, Ethan could only stare at the wall clock. 11:59:50. 10 seconds. The second hand crawled forward. Midnight arrived. His phone lit up. A bank message appeared. 41,259 yuan had just landed in his account. Ethan stared at the balance until the tension in his body finally loosened. 40,000 yuan in a single day. In Kinksy Town, where many people earned barely 3,000 a month, this was not income. This was a cheat code wearing a bank uniform. And this was only the beginner zone. If one town gave him 40,000 a day, what about a city? A province? A country? But Ethan did not have time to dream. That money meant one thing right now. His parents could live. His phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Selena. The name alone made killing intent flash through Ethan's eyes, but his voice stayed tired and anxious when he answered. Selena's voice came through soft and sweet, like poison mixed with honey. She told him there was no money in the factory account. She claimed she and Victor were trying to borrow funds. Then she mentioned a client willing to pay an advance deposit tomorrow night. Near Panshin Highway, Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. So the death trap was already scheduled, but he only sounded grateful. He promised he would be there on time. After hanging up, Ethan threw the crumpled shipping orders into the trash, grabbed his car keys and walked out. First, he would save his parents. Then he would make the traders watch their perfect plan rot from the inside. The town health center was miserable. The hallway smelled like cheap disinfectant and sweat. The lights flickered. The ceiling fan made a tired clicking sound, as if even the building wanted to resign. As soon as Ethan walked in, nurse Rosa Finch lifted her head from the station. Rosa was Victor's cousin, and in Ethan's last life, she had helped delay his parents' treatment while mocking them every chance she got. Tonight, she sneered the moment she saw him. She asked why he had arrived so late, as if his parents were just free gifts from a phone recharge. Ethan looked at her once. Only once. That dead calm stare shut her mouth faster than any argument could. He walked straight to the observation room. It was barely a ward. 3 rusty beds were crammed into a room that looked like it was used for storage on better days. On the far bed, his father Thomas Vale lay with his leg in a cast, face twisted in pain even while half asleep. His mother Mara sat beside him, clothes stained with dust and blood, holding his hand and quietly crying. The sight hit Ethan in the chest. In the last life, he had failed them. In this one, he would not let them suffer another second. Mara looked up and broke down when she saw him. The health center had barely treated Thomas. They claimed the family had no money. They said the factory was finished. Before Ethan could comfort her, Rosa appeared at the doorway with a payment reminder and that smug little expression people wear when they think they are untouchable. The bill was 3,452 yuan. She told Ethan to pay or take his parents and leave the next morning. Then she laughed at the rumor that his factory was an empty shell. Ethan listened until she called him useless. Then his hand moved. Slap. The sound cracked through the room. Rosa staggered, clutching her swelling cheek, too shocked to breathe. Ethan's voice stayed low. He asked how much Victor paid her to bark. Then he took out his phone and showed her the bank message. Over 40,000 yuan. Rosa's face changed color so fast it could have been a traffic light with anxiety. Ethan did not waste another word on her. He walked to the payment counter, slapped down his card, and told the deputy director to charge the bill. The payment went through. The entire hallway fell quiet. Wasn't he supposed to be bankrupt? Why did he swipe the card like paying medical bills was an inconvenience between meetings? Ethan immediately demanded a transfer to City No. 1 People's Hospital. The deputy director tried to stall. Ethan slammed the counter and reminded him very clearly that if the family paid and requested a transfer, the hospital had to cooperate. And if they delayed, Ethan would report every shady connection between the health center and Victor. That was enough. Within half an hour, an ambulance carried his parents out of Kingsey Town. By the time they reached the city hospital, Ethan had arranged a special care ward, paid a 30,000 yuan deposit, and secured proper treatment for his father. Thomas needed surgery, but the doctor said the injuries were manageable. With rest, he could recover. Mara worried about the money, so Ethan gave her a calm lie about dividends from an agricultural e-commerce investment. The explanation was smooth, almost too smooth. Apparently, dying once came with business negotiation experience and emergency lying skills. Once his parents were stable, Ethan stepped outside the hospital, lit a cigarette, and looked into the night. His parents were safe. Now the stage belonged to Victor and Selina. The next day, Ethan did not go to the factory. He went shopping, not for clothes, not for food, for revenge equipment. 2 high-definition night vision micro cameras, a small infrared drone, extra memory cards. By nightfall, he drove his battered Wuling delivery van to Panshin Highway. The road was dark, sharp, and dangerous. No streetlights, tight bends, a cliff on one side, a mountain wall on the other. At the largest hairpin turn, Ethan stopped. This was the exact place where he died. In his last life, a heavy dump truck came roaring around the blind corner and rammed his van off the road. Victor had chosen the spot well. One hit and there would be no survival. But this time, Ethan parked the van in the middle of the bend, angled it exactly where the truck would strike, turned off the engine, and climbed out. Half an hour later, he was hidden on the slope above the road with a full view of the trap. The cameras were placed. The drone hovered silently in the dark. Ethan opened an iced cola and waited. His phone rang right on schedule. Selina, she asked where he was, sounding worried. Too worried. Ethan lowered his voice and told her he was at the biggest hairpin turn, but the van had stalled. Selina's voice jumped with barely hidden excitement. She told him not to walk around. She told him to stay in the car. The client was driving a big truck, she said. He would see the headlights. Ethan almost laughed. Stay in the car, right? Because nothing says caring girlfriend like giving murder instructions in a sweet voice. He promised her he would wait. Then he leaned back against a tree and adjusted the camera focus. At 11:15, the valley began to rumble. 2 brutal beams of highlight tore through the darkness. A heavy dump truck with no license plate came charging into the bend, fully loaded with mud and stone, moving far too fast for a mountain road. The driver saw the van. He did not brake. He accelerated. The crash exploded through the mountain. Metal screamed. The Wuling van crumpled like paper, rolled through the weak guardrail, and vanished into the black cliff below. The dump truck smashed into the mountain wall and stalled, smoke rising from its hood. From the slope, Ethan watched with cold eyes. The driver stumbled out, bleeding from the head. He looked down into the ravine, confirmed the target had fallen, then pulled out his phone. The drone lowered. The camera zoomed in. Ethan captured everything. The driver's face, the damaged guardrail, the phone screen, the WeChat contact, the voice message to Victor. The driver said the job was done. The person and car had gone down. His truck was wrecked. Victor and Miss Cross needed to bring the final payment and take him away. Ethan smiled. The stage was set. The actors had entered. Now they were just waiting for the lead villains to arrive. At 2 in the morning, a white Honda Accord rolled toward the crash site with its headlights off. Victor stepped out first, cigarette in his mouth, eyes shining with greed. Selina followed, clinging to his shirt, her face pale under the moonlight. She asked if Ethan had really fallen. Victor said a loaded dump truck would flatten him even if he were a transformer. The driver came over, still bleeding, and demanded the final payment. Victor tossed him a black plastic bag filled with cash and told him to leave Kingsey Town forever. Then he breathed like a man who had just inherited the world. The factory was his now. Ethan was dead. Tomorrow morning, Victor would walk into the processing plant and take charge. And above them in the bushes, Ethan's drone recorded every filthy word. By 10 the next morning, Victor had already moved into Ethan's office. He sat in Ethan's chair with his feet on Ethan's desk, while Selena brewed tea like she was already the lady of the factory. Suppliers crowded the room, angry and demanding payment. Victor played the victim perfectly. He told them Ethan had emptied the accounts and run away out of guilt. Then he produced a contract to mortgage the factory's 3 newest automatic packaging machines. Those machines had cost Ethan 300,000 yuan. Victor planned to pawn them for a third of that, move the money through his own contacts, and hollow out the factory before anyone understood what happened. The suppliers were suspicious, but they wanted their money. Victor picked up the pen to sign. Then the office door exploded open. Bang! A calm voice cut through the room. "Since when did this factory become yours?" The pen slipped from Victor's hand. Selena dropped the hot tea and collapsed onto the floor. In the doorway stood Ethan Vale. Plain white shirt, night hair, hands in his pockets. Alive, no blood, no broken bones, not even a torn sleeve. Victor looked like someone had poured ice water straight into his soul. Selena trembled so hard her teeth clicked. She asked if he was human or a ghost. Ethan walked toward them slowly, his shoes crunching over broken porcelain. With every step, their confidence cracked. When he reached Victor, Ethan leaned down and patted his shoulder. His voice was gentle enough to be terrifying. He asked if the wind at Pansion Highway last night had been too cold. Victor and Selena froze. Now they understood. They knew. He had known all along. The crash was not a failed murder. It was a trap, and they had walked right into it with both feet, and a signed confession in the form of stupidity. One supplier finally reacted and asked for the 40,000 yuan Ethan owed him. Ethan took out his phone. After hospital payments, cameras, and the drone, he had nearly emptied the account. But midnight had come again. Another 41,259 yuan had arrived from the system. So Ethan asked for the supplier's card number. 10 seconds later, the payment notification rang out. 40,000 yuan received. The office went silent. Victor nearly choked on his own shock. Selena had emptied the account. Victor had maxed out every channel. Ethan should have had nothing. So where did he keep pulling cash from? Ethan told the rest of the suppliers he would pay them within 3 days, and his reputation carried enough weight for them to live. Then he shut the office door. Only Victor, Selena, and Ethan remained. Ethan wiped the hand that had touched Victor's shoulder, tossed the tissue onto Victor's face, and fired them both on the spot. As for the clients Victor had stolen, Ethan was not in a hurry. He had time, and he wanted them to feel the walls closing in, one brick at a time. Outside, the factory workers were restless. More than 30 of them stood at the workshop entrance, some holding brooms, some holding wrenches, all waiting for answers. Victor had told them the factory could not pay wages. One of the veteran workers, Mason Reed, stepped forward and asked if they were really about to lose their pay. Ethan looked at the people who had built the factory with him. He had only about 5,000 yuan left, but he knew exactly where it had to go. He told them the factory had a black sheep, and that problem had been handled. Their wages would not be delayed. Not only that, starting this month, everyone would get a 10% raise. Then he handed Mason 5,000 yuan to distribute as an emergency hardship bonus. The courtyard was silent for 2 seconds. Then the workers erupted. They knew Ethan. He worked beside them. He paid what he owed. He never made empty promises. Ethan gave them one more warning. Anyone who secretly contacted Victor and leaked factory information would regret it. Kindness in one hand, steel in the other. That was how Ethan stabilized the factory before sunset. At midnight, the system settled again. Another 41,259 yuan entered his account. But this time there was more. Because he had stabilized the factory and increased his local influence, his regional upgrade progress rose to 15 out of 100. Ethan finally understood the second layer of the system. Money was only the beginning. Influence could upgrade the region. And if the region upgraded, his daily income would grow far beyond Kinxi Town's population. He looked at the date circled on his calendar. July 14. Tomorrow, an executive from Xingnang Group, a major provincial procurement company, would arrive for an on-site inspection. In his last life, Ethan had fought like mad for this order. He drank until he vomited, ran meetings until his legs ached, and invested his family's savings into those 3 new packaging machines just to meet Xingnang's standards. The contract was supposed to be signed tomorrow. Now Ethan understood why Victor and Selena were so desperate to kill him before then. They wanted the order. They wanted the factory. They wanted to step over Ethan's corpse and call it business. Ethan crushed out his cigarette. Tomorrow, he would let them embarrass themselves in front of the provincial giant. That night, he called Mason and told him to gather the sharpest workers. Tune the 3 packaging machines to perfect condition. Clean the workshop until it shines. mind. Prepare for inspection. By morning, Victor and Selena were waiting at the Kinksy Town highway exit in a rented black Mercedes. Victor wore an expensive suit that fit him so badly it looked like the suit was trying to escape. Selena had layered foundation over the dark circles from her sleepless night. They were waiting for director Martin Hale from Xingnang Group. Victor planned to intercept him before he reached Ethan's factory. He would claim Ethan gambled away the money, failed to pay suppliers, lost the workers, and pushed the plant into collapse. Then he would guide Director Hale to a fake new factory and steal the order. Soon, a black Audi with provincial plates rolled out of the toll station. Victor rushed forward with a fawning smile and introduced himself. Director Hale barely looked at his business card. He remembered that today's meeting was with Ethan Vale. Victor immediately launched into his performance. He said Ethan was corrupt. Selena chimed in, pretending to be the loyal finance worker who had watched the accounts hit zero. They insisted their new factory could handle the order instead. Director Hale listened, expression unreadable. He had spent 20 years in business. He had seen plenty of people cry with dry eyes. Instead of following them to the fake site, he said they would visit the original Vale processing plant first. Victor was secretly thrilled. In his mind, Ethan's workers should be striking. The machines should be silent. The suppliers should be screaming at the gate. 10 minutes later, Victor stepped out of his car and froze. The factory was not dead. It was alive. The gate had been repainted overnight. The courtyard was spotless. Workers in clean blue uniforms were loading beautifully packaged agricultural products into a cold chain logistics truck. And from inside the workshop came the steady roar of the 3 automatic packaging machines running at full power. Victor's face twisted. Oh, where did Ethan get the money? Why were the workers still loyal? Director Hale looked at him coldly and asked if this was what he called a collapsed factory. Victor panicked. He shouted that it was fake, that Ethan was acting, that the account had no money. Then Ethan's voice drifted from the courtyard, lazy and sharp. Barking at someone else's factory gate this early was not very dignified. Ethan walked out in a tailored dark suit, surrounded by workshop supervisors. He no longer looked like a desperate small-town boss cornered by debt. He looked calm, controlled, dangerous. Director Hale greeted him with a handshake. Ethan apologized for the spectacle and explained that 2 internal traders had been fired after dirty dealings were discovered. Victor exploded, pointing and screaming that Ethan was broke and could not even pay wages. Ethan did not argue. He simply reached into his suit and took out 4 thick envelopes, 40,000 yuan in cash. He handed it to Mason as an overnight overtime bonus for the workers who had tuned the machines and cleaned the plant. The workers cheered. Real money beats rumors every time. Victor stared at the red banknotes as if they were curses. Ethan looked at him and smiled. He told Victor to open his eyes and see clearly. Ethan Vale had plenty of money. Director Hale had seen enough. Stable cash flow, loyal workers, advanced machines running smoothly, a boss who handled crisis without flinching, and on the other side, 2 desperate liars covered in sweat and excuses. Director Hale permanently blacklisted Victor from all Xingnang Group business. Victor tried to beg, but Ethan called security. Mason and several workers grabbed Victor and Selena and threw them straight into the mud pit across the road. The factory burst into laughter as the 2 crawled out filthy and humiliated, then fled in their rented car. With the noise gone, the real negotiation began. Director Hale inspected the production line personally, checked the product quality, and signed the contract on the spot. Xingnang Group would transfer a 300,000 yuan advance payment to the factory that afternoon. Ethan shook Director Hale's hand. Inside his mind, the system sounded again. The factory had survived its crisis. His economic influence in Kinksy Town had increased. Regional upgrade progress rose again. 30 out of 100. Ethan's smile deepened. The advance payment would revive the factory and give him the perfect legal cover for future system money. From this moment on, he had 2 weapons. The system as his endless backing, and real business profit as the blade in his hand. Victor thought stealing a client list would choke Ethan's future, but Ethan had already taken back the factory, saved his parents, exposed the murder trap, stabilized his workers, secured the biggest order of his life, and turned his enemies into a town-wide joke. And that was only the beginning, because Ethan was not planning to defeat Victor and Selena quickly. No, he was going to carve away everything they stole. Their money, their connections, their pride, their last little fantasy that they were ever in control. They had killed him once. Now he had returned with 1 yuan per person per day. And every midnight, revenge got richer. But Victor Shaw was not ready to admit he had lost. In an abandoned warehouse on the southern edge of Kinksy Town, he threw his mud-stained jacket onto a broken table and cursed Ethan like the name itself had punched him in the mouth. Selena Cross stood nearby, wiping dried mud off her heels, her face pale and tight with fear. She wanted to run, take whatever money they had left, leave town, and never look back. For once, that was probably the smartest idea she had ever had. Victor refused. His eyes were bloodshot. His pride was bleeding worse than his body. Ethan had humiliated him in front of the workers, ruined him in front of Xingnang Group, and thrown him into a mud pit like garbage. Victor could not swallow it. He slapped the briefcase in his hand. Inside was the client list he had stolen from Ethan's factory. To Victor, that list was his last weapon. He believed those old clients were the real lifeline of Vale processing plant. If he could steal them, Ethan's goods would pile up in storage, the factory's cash flow would choke, and the Xingnang order would become a trap instead of a blessing. So Victor started calling, one client after another. He told them Ethan's factory was in trouble. He claimed he had started his own operation with the same team and the same premium charcoal roasted nuts. Then he offered a 15% discount. That was enough to make several greedy old clients lean forward. One of them, Mr. Lowe, was the biggest and most difficult of the bunch. He cared about profit like it was oxygen and had never met a discount he did not want to hug. Still, he asked about quality. Victor, desperate to grab the order, promised the quality would be exactly the same. If anything went wrong, he would compensate Lowe 10 times the loss. 10 times. The kind of promise only a desperate man makes when his brain has left the building and locked the door behind it. Lowe immediately gave him 200 boxes for a chain supermarket shipment. By the end of half a day, Victor had stolen 4 major old clients by slashing prices and signing brutal compensation agreements. Meanwhile, at Vale processing plant, Mason Reed rushed into Ethan's office sweating like he had run through fire. The old clients were canceling. They wanted their deposits back. Victor was undercutting prices by 15%. Mason looked ready to fight someone with a clipboard, but Ethan only sat in his leather chair, holding a cup of fresh tea, calm enough to make the whole crisis feel rude for interrupting him. He told Mason to refund them, not just the deposits, every cent, no penalties. Mason froze. Those were major sales channels. If they left, the raw nuts already purchased could get stuck in the warehouse. Ethan smiled faintly. To him, those clients were not being stolen. They were clearing landmines. He reminded Mason of the factory's highest volume product, charcoal roasted macadamias and pecans. Every batch had to sit in cold storage for 4 hours before packaging, held at a strict 16 degrees. Mason had always thought it was just to cool the nuts faster, but Ethan explained the real reason. July was hot and humid. Freshly roasted nuts carried heat deep inside. If they were bagged too quickly without stepped cooling and dehumidification, the kernels would absorb moisture, release oil, turn rancid, and even grow mold inside the sealed bags within 48 hours. Mason's eyes widened. That process was one of the factory's true secrets. Only Ethan and Mason knew the exact data. Victor did sales. He drank with clients. He bragged outside. But he had never understood the production line. He thought buying second-hand ovens and throwing nuts inside was enough to build a factory. That was not entrepreneurship. That was cosplay with machinery. And because Lowe's order was urgent, Victor would roast, bag, and ship as fast as possible, which meant his stolen order was already poisoned by his own ignorance. Ethan leaned back and told Mason to focus everyone on the Xingnang order. As for Victor, they could prepare snacks and watch the show. 3 days later, in a supermarket receiving warehouse in another province, the show began. Mr. Lowe opened the shipment. Then his face went purple with rage. The nuts inside the bags were no longer crisp and fragrant. They were shiny with oil, damp with condensation, and giving off a rancid smell that made people want to apologize to their noses. Some even had green mold spots. And it was not one bad box. Every inspected batch failed. The supermarket purchasing manager exploded. The contract was canceled. All products under Lowe's name would be permanently removed from the chain. And Lowe had to pay damages for damaging the supermarket's reputation. Lowe nearly collapsed. Then he remembered Victor's 10 times compensation agreement. His hand shook as he called Victor. He screamed that all 200 boxes were moldy. The supermarket was demanding compensation, and Victor needed to prepare 800,000 yuan immediately. If Victor was short even 1 cent, Lowe would bring people to Kinxi Town and take payment from his bones. In the warehouse, Victor's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. His dream of a comeback had lasted about as long as a cheap plastic bag in a thunderstorm. That evening, Victor and Selina stood outside Vale processing plant, desperate and filthy. Lowe wanted 800,000 by midnight. Victor had nowhere else to turn, so he came to Ethan. Selina knew it was hopeless. Ethan would rather frame their request and hang it on the wall as comedy than lend them money. But Victor believed Ethan would weigh profit and loss. He still thought the stolen client list had value. The two slipped into the factory while the guard was away and rushed straight to Ethan's office. The room was cool. The air conditioner hummed. Ethan sat behind his desk, twirling a Parker pen, his phone showing another fresh system settlement and a healthy balance strengthened by the Xingnang advance. Victor burst in and dropped to his knees. He called Ethan brother. He cried. He begged. He admitted he was wrong. Selena tried to grab Ethan's hand, tears falling as she claimed she had only been confused, that Victor had tricked her, and that deep down she had always loved Ethan. Ethan's voice cut through her performance like ice. He told her to take her dirty hands off him. Selena froze. Victor kowtowed and explained the crisis. Lowe's goods had gone moldy. The compensation was $800,000. If Ethan lent him the money, Victor would return the entire client list. Ethan laughed. The client list. At this point, that list was not a lifeline. It was a record of everyone angry enough to skin Victor alive. Then Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Victor and Selena could hear. He asked if they really thought what happened on Panshin Highway had been flawless. Both of them went rigid. That fear again. The fear of realizing the man they killed had been standing in the dark, watching them confess with their own mouths. Victor suddenly understood something else. The rotten goods, the stolen orders, the compensation trap. Had Ethan planned that too? Ethan did not even bother claiming credit. Victor's own greed and stupidity had dug the pit. Ethan had simply let him jump in. As for the $800,000, Ethan said he would rather throw the money into Kinxie River just to hear the splash than give 1 cent to animals like them. Then he called security and had them dragged out like trash. Night fell. Smoke curled through an underground mahjong parlor on the edge of town. Victor stood trembling beside a table. Selena hiding behind him like fear had physically glued her there. Across from them sat a local loan shark everyone called Blade. Bare chest, dragon tattoo, butterfly knife dancing between his fingers. Blade listened to Victor ask for $800,000 and smiled like he had just smelled fresh blood. Victor had no factory, no reputation, no real collateral except rented space and secondhand machines. Still, Blade offered the money. The terms were vicious. Borrow $800,000, receive only $720,000. 7 days later, repay $1,040,000. If he failed, Selena would be sold, and Victor would lose a hand and a kidney. Selena screamed for him not to sign. Victor signed anyway. He had already convinced himself he could find a comeback in 7 days. But the moment his blood-red thumbprint hit that contract, he did not buy time. He bought a countdowns, and while Victor stepped into hell, Ethan sat in his office watching midnight arrive. The system deposited another 41,259 yuan. The number on his screen climbed again. Ethan smiled. His enemy was drowning in debt. And every day, Ethan's river kept rising. The next morning, Ethan called 3 major raw material suppliers into his conference room. They arrived sweating and nervous. A few days earlier, when Victor and Selena were stirring chaos, these suppliers had wavered. They had not openly betrayed Ethan, but some had flirted with Victor behind the scenes and prepared to cut off supply. Now the factory was roaring. Cold chain trucks were loading outside. The Xingnang order had turned Ethan from a struggling town boss into the man everyone wanted to stand near. Ethan entered with financial statements and sat at the head of the table. No small talk, no fake smiles. He told them their combined outstanding payments totaled 115,000 yuan. Then he asked for their account numbers. The suppliers blinked. They expected delays, maybe excuses. Instead, Ethan paid them in full within minutes. One phone rang, then another, then the third. Real payments landed, every yuan accounted for. Their faces flushed with shame. In a world where debts often dragged until the end of the year, Ethan had cleared his accounts cleanly and fast. Then his tone changed. The money was settled. Now came the rules. He looked at one supplier, Mr. Zane, and asked why he had secretly given Victor the factory's raw material base price. Zane's face drained. He tried to explain. Ethan cut him off. From that day on, Vale Processing Plant would stop buying from him indefinitely. Zane almost dropped to his knees. Ethan had just secured a huge provincial order. Being cut out now meant losing a mountain of future profit. But security escorted him out. The remaining 2 suppliers barely dared to breathe. Ethan softened his tone. They had wavered, but they had not leaked secrets. So he would give them a chance. From now on, the factory's raw material standards would rise by 1 level. Anyone who tried to pass off inferior goods would lose the partnership immediately. By the time those 2 suppliers left, they were not just cooperating with Ethan. They were aligned with him. The system chimed. Ethan had settled external debts and integrated the core supply chain. His business reputation had risen. His regional upgrade progress reached 50 out of 100. Halfway there. And while Ethan's influence grew, Victor's rented factory became a tomb with a roof. His secondhand roasting machines sat useless. His phone was shattered on the table. Every raw material supplier in Kinxie Town refused him. Ethan had paid debts in cash, set strict rules, and quietly made it clear that anyone supplying Victor was opposing Vale Processing Plant. So no one sold Victor anything. Not raw walnuts, not peanuts, not even a moldy leftover sack to pity him. Victor had borrowed from Blade to pay low, but that only bought him 7 days before a larger debt came due. No raw materials meant no production. No production meant no cash. No cash meant Blade would collect in flesh. Selena broke down crying. Victor snapped. His eyes locked toward Vale processing plant, and despair twisted into madness. If legitimate business was blocked, then Ethan had forced his hand. That was what Victor told himself, because villains love calling consequences being forced. At 2 in the morning, Victor and Selena crept toward the back wall of the factory, carrying 2 red gasoline cans. The factory was quiet. The warehouse lights glowed dimly. Victor touched the switchblade at his waist and told Selena they were going straight to Ethan's office. His plan was simple and insane. Threaten Ethan. Force him to transfer the company's working capital to a black offshore account. If Ethan refused, Victor would burn the goods and machinery needed for the Xingnang shipment. A 400,000 yuan delivery was waiting for morning. If it burned, the penalties could crush the factory. Victor believed Ethan would pay to avoid disaster. So he kicked open the office door, knife in one hand, gasoline in the other, and roared for Ethan not to move. Then his voice died. Ethan was not asleep. He was sitting upright behind his desk with hot tea in front of him. Calm, ready, waiting. The lights snapped on. Mason, the security guard Caleb, and several men with batons blocked the doorway. Victor's face went white, but he had no exit left. He unscrewed a gasoline can and splashed fuel across the desk and carpet, then raised a windproof lighter with his thumb on the switch. He screamed for everyone to back off. He demanded the money. If they moved, he would burn everything. Selena collapsed to the floor, shaking and covering her head. Mason and the guards tightened their grips, but Ethan did not blink. He flicked a drop of gasoline off his suit cuff, like Victor had only spilled cheap tea. Then he stood. Victor wanted to die together. Ethan told him he was overestimating himself. A piece of scum like Victor was not worthy of dragging him into the grave. Victor screamed again, but Ethan picked up a remote control and pressed one button. The TV on the wall lit up. Panshin Highway appeared on the screen. The dump truck, the impact, the van flying off the cliffs. Then the video switched to Victor and Selena at the crash site, handing a bag of cash to the bleeding driver. Victor froze. The lighter shook in his hand. His whole face collapsed. He asked how Ethan had the footage when that road had no surveillance. Ethan's voice carried no warmth. When Victor was paying the driver, Ethan had been watching from the hillside above. Tonight was not just extortion. Tonight was attempted murder evidence finally coming home. Police sirens screamed outside the factory. 3 police cars surrounded the building. Heavy footsteps rushed up the stairs, and officers burst into the office with weapons raised. Victor dropped to his knees. Selena fainted. The police cuffed them both. Ethan handed the lead detective a USB drive containing the gasoline threat, the knife, the extortion, and the full evidence from Panshin Highway. The detective took one look at the soaked office floor and the footage, then told Ethan to come to the station to give a statement. If everything checked out, Victor and Selena would be lucky if prison became their permanent address. Victor was dragged past Ethan with an ashen face, tears streaking through the dirt. This time, he could not even spit out one last threat. Say no, it was over. When the police cars disappeared into the night, the system chimed again. Ethan had eliminated the core threat, preserved his assets, and uprooted the fatal hidden danger. Regional upgrade progress rose to 65 out of 100. Ethan stood by the window as the night wind carried away the smell of gasoline. The blood debt of 2 lifetimes had finally been settled. But the next morning, Kinksy Town woke up louder than ever. At a steamed bun shop near the main street, everyone was talking at once. Police cars had rushed into Vale processing plant last night. Victor and Selena had been dragged out in handcuffs. Someone's cousin at the station claimed Victor had brought gasoline to extort Ethan, only for Ethan to be sitting in the office waiting for him. And the wildest part, the old Panshin Highway crash had also been exposed as a hired murder attempt. The whole shop went silent. Then the whispers turned into awe. Ethan Vale was not just lucky. He had methods. In a small town, kindness could win workers, but a sharp hand made enemies think twice before reaching for your throat. Just when people wondered whether the factory would shut down for the investigation, a deep truck horn thundered down the road. Everyone rushed outside. Through the morning mist came 8 heavy cold-chain semi-trailers with provincial plates, moving like a steel dragon into Kinksy Town. Each white trailer carried the green logo of Xingnang Group. The largest agricultural products giant in the province had arrived at Ethan's gate. So much for bankruptcy. The factory opened wide. Mason led dozens of workers in brand new uniforms, lined up with their backs straight and spirits high. Ethan walked out in a clean white shirt. The quality inspection supervisor from Xingnang jumped down from the lead truck and shook Ethan's hand, saying Director Hale had ordered the first batch to ship that day. Ethan smiled and waved. Start loading. Forklifts roared. Pallets of premium charcoal roasted nuts, moved into the cold chain trucks one after another. The town watched, stunned. Rumors died right there in the road. This was not a factory collapsing. This was a factory grabbing the biggest opportunity Kinxi Town had seen in years. Then two red banners dropped from the office building. One announced Vale Processing Plant as Xingnang Group's only designated cooperative base in Kinxi Town. The other announced expanded production and cash purchases of high-quality agricultural products from the whole town. No IOUs. The crowd erupted. For farmers, that last line mattered more than any fancy slogan. Most buyers wrote IOUs and settled months later, if they settled cleanly at all. Ethan set up a long table at the factory gate, placed a cash counter on it, and slammed down a black canvas bag full of fresh 100 yuan bills. Then he lifted a megaphone. Walnuts, peanuts, chestnuts. As long as the goods met factory standards, Vale Processing Plant would pay market price plus an extra 10 cents per caddy. Cash on the spot. No credit. An old peanut farmer stepped forward first with half a sack of kernels. Ethan checked them, found the quality excellent, and ordered finance to pay him 80 yuan immediately. The old man clutched the cash like he had just touched a miracle. Then he shouted that he had 500 more caddies at home and hurried off to bring them. That broke the dam. Farmers scattered in every direction, racing home for their stored goods, afraid Ethan would stop buying before they arrived. The cash counter became the most beautiful sound in Kinxi Town, and at the edge of the crowd, a low-key black Volkswagen stopped. A middle-aged man stepped out with a briefcase, thinning hair, and eyes sharp enough to count profit from across the street. This was Secretary Calvin Pierce, the top official in Kinxi Town. His office director whispered that Kinxi had not been this lively in years. Secretary Pierce looked at Ethan surrounded by villagers, and appreciation flashed in his eyes. The town's investment and farmer income targets had been lagging badly. Now Ethan had dragged a provincial giant into Kinxi, created momentum, paid farmers in cash, and turned a local factory into a political achievement engine. In other words, to Secretary Pierce, Ethan looked less like a businessman and more like a career-saving gift with legs. Mason spotted him and quickly warned Ethan. Ethan immediately put down the ledger and walked over with the perfect amount of respect. He shook Secretary Pierce's hand with both hands and invited him inside. Secretary Pierce deliberately praised him loudly in front of the villagers. Ethan had brought in a provincial enterprise and used real money to benefit local farmers. He called Ethan a benchmark young entrepreneur of Kinxi Town. That public praise was an official seal stamped directly onto Ethan's reputation. From that moment, everyone in town understood something. Ethan Vale was no longer just a factory owner. He was someone the town government had noticed, and Ethan knew exactly how to respond. He lowered his posture and gave the credit back to the town leadership, saying Vale Processing Plant could only grow because of the good business environment created by the local government. Secretary Pierce laughed, clearly pleased. Then his eyes sharpened. The factory area was small, he said. With Xingnang's order and future purchasing demand, could Ethan really handle the scale? Ethan nearly smiled. There it was, the opening he had been waiting for. He sighed and said the current factory was too small. He wanted to expand processing, hire more struggling households, and grow Kinxi's industry, but the space could not support it. If there was no solution, he might have to build a new plant in Yangcheng County next door. Secretary Pierce's expression changed almost imperceptibly. There was no way he would let this opportunity leave Kinxi. He immediately mentioned the abandoned old brick kiln factory on the south side of town. Large area, good access, perfect for expansion. Exactly the place Ethan had wanted. But Ethan did not grab too quickly. He hesitated, mentioning village collective land, procedures, delays, and approvals. Secretary Pierce leaned closer and promised the town would set up a special project team to push everything through with a green light. In return, the new factory had to help with employment and agricultural tax targets. Ethan straightened immediately. If the old brick kiln factory land was approved, Vale Group's Phase 2 project would create at least 300 local jobs and pay 5 times last year's taxes. Secretary Pierce laughed and told Ethan to bring the company seal to the town office that afternoon. They would settle it over tea. As the official car pulled away, Ethan looked toward the south side of town. He had just obtained the strongest backing Kinxi Town could offer, but he also knew local paperwork was never the whole battlefield. The old brick kiln factory sat in Xiaowen Village, and its village director, Harold Knox, was notorious for squeezing profit out of anything that passed his door. If Ethan wanted that land, he would have to deal with another kind of enemy. Not a murderer this time, not a traitor, a local snake guarding the next door to expansion. Ethan's eyes deepened. The first round of revenge was over. Now the real rise of Vale Group was about to begin. The very next morning, Ethan learned exactly why Xiaowen Village had such a nasty reputation. On the only road leading to the old brick kiln factory, someone had dumped a huge pile of yellow soil right across the middle. Two broken tractors sat diagonally in front of it with their engines off. Dozens of villagers squatted under the trees, smoking, playing cards, and pretending they had all gathered there by accident. Very natural, very casual. Just a whole village road blocked like a wall with dirt and tractors. Mason Reed got out of the SUV with the survey team and immediately shouted for them to move the tractors. No one answered. Cards kept slapping down. Smoke kept drifting through the heat. Finally, an older villager named Grant Knox stood up and said they were repairing the road. Mason asked how long repairs would take. Grant shrugged. Maybe 10 days. Maybe half a month. Maybe 3 or 5 years. The villagers laughed. Mason nearly exploded, but Ethan raised a hand and stopped him. These people were not the real problem. They were pawns. The person moving them had not arrived yet. Then a motorcycle roared up. Harold Knox, the village director of Zion Village, climbed off wearing a camouflage shirt and a face full of confidence. He scolded the villagers for show, then turned to Ethan with a fake smile and stretched out his hand. Ethan did not take it. He simply asked when the road would open. Harold's smile faded. He told Ethan to stop pretending. The old brick kiln factory might be abandoned, but it was still Zion Village collective land. A paper approval from the town did not mean Ethan could just walk in and start building. Ethan stayed calm and asked for his conditions. Harold liked that. He stepped closer and laid out his terms. All land compensation had to go into the village committee's account first, and the committee would distribute it later. Also, every bit of sand, gravel, cement, and transport for the construction site had to be contracted to Harold's own village fleet. Without his fleet, Ethan would not get a single brick into the site. It was extortion with a village seal attached. Mason's jaw tightened. If Harold controlled the materials, the prices would shoot up, the quality would collapse, and the whole Phase 2 project would start with rot buried in its foundation. But Ethan only smiled. He asked if Harold was claiming the right to represent the entire village. Harold lifted his chin. In Zion Village, no one represented the village except him. The villagers behind him stood straighter, silently backing his authority. Ethan nodded. Then he told Mason to put the survey team back in the vehicles. They were leaving. Mason was stunned. Harold was stunned too. Ethan opened the car door, looked back once, and told Harold to repair the road as slowly as he wanted. But he hoped Harold could sit in that village director position just as steadily. Then the SUVs drove away. Behind them, Harold sneered. He believed Ethan was bluffing. The Xingnang order was huge. Phase 2 was urgent. Within 3 days, Harold was sure Ethan would come to his house with gifts and beg. Inside the SUV, Mason was furious. He asked if they should bring people and handle it the rough way. Ethan looked out at the fields, eyes calm. They were legitimate businessmen. The rough way belonged to people with no better tools. Harold's confidence came from clan power. The villagers followed him because they believed the family rules and village pressure would protect their share of profit. But Ethan understood something simple. So-called iron unity could be cracked by one thing: real cash. He told Mason to go back to town and prepare 3 moves. First, hire the best security company in the city. He wanted professional personnel with body cameras stationed at the site. Second, gather finance, human resources, legal contracts, the company seal, and cash counters. Third, tomorrow morning, set up a workstation at the entrance of Zion Village. Mason asked what the station was for. Ethan's answer was short: distribute money, not through the village committee, directly to the villagers. Land compensation paid in cash on the spot. New factory jobs offered directly to households. Half a month's salary advanced immediately to anyone who signed. Ethan wanted to see which was stronger: Harold's clan rules or Ethan's banknotes. At 8 the next morning, Zion Village woke to the sound of engines. This time, no bulldozers came. A line of black minibuses rolled into the village entrance. The doors opened, and professional security personnel stepped out in black uniforms with shields, helmets, boots, and bright red body camera lights blinking on their chests. No one carried offensive weapons. Everything was legal. Everything was recorded. And everything looked very expensive. Behind them came the legal team and finance staff from Vale Processing Plant. They set up red sunshades, folding tables, laptops, printers, and a long cordon. Then Mason placed a money counter on the table. Click. 3 aluminum cases opened. Stacks of 100 yuan bills sat inside like red bricks. 900,000 yuan in cash. The villagers' eyes almost locked onto it. Ethan picked up a microphone and greeted Zion Village. His voice rolled through the speakers, loud enough to drown out the whole morning. He said Harold had been right about one thing: building a factory should not mean only the company benefits. The villagers deserved benefits too. The crowd grew thicker. Grant Knox was there. A younger villager, Gabe Knox, was there. So were the men who had blocked the road yesterday. But Harold's cousin shouted from the side: warning everyone that anyone who took Ethan's money privately would be betraying the clan and could be removed from the family records. That threat landed hard. The villagers who had been edging forward suddenly stopped. In Ziowan village, those family records were more than paper. They were pressure, identity, fear. Ethan expected this. He raised the microphone again and reminded everyone that land compensation legally belonged to the farmers themselves. Withholding it through middlemen was illegal. Today, he was not negotiating with the village committee. He was negotiating with individual households. Anyone with confirmed land shares at the brick kiln could bring household documents, sign the compensation agreement, and receive cash immediately. Then he added the second blade. Every household that signed would receive a formal factory job opportunity, with a base salary of 2,800 yuan plus overtime. Anyone who signed a labor contract today would receive a half-month salary advance, 1,400 yuan in cash. The crowd stirred. For struggling rural families, 1,400 yuan was not a small number. It was medicine, tuition, debt relief, meat on the table. Still, no one dared take the first step. Then a thin, hunched man pushed out from the back of the crowd, clutching his household registration book and yellowed land papers. His name was Eli Knox. His wife had been bedridden for years. His youngest son had just been admitted to county high school. Tuition was short, medicine was short, and his family was one bad week away from breaking. The night before, he had gone to Harold's house to borrow money. Harold's wife had not even let him through the door. Now Eli's eyes were red, but his voice was firm. He asked Ethan if his family's 3 fen of land could be signed. Harold's cousin roared that Eli was betraying the clan. Eli did not look back. Clan rules could not decide whether his wife lived or whether his child went to school. He would sign. Ethan personally opened the cordon and brought him inside. The legal team checked the papers. 3 fen of land meant 9,000 yuan in compensation. The job advance added another 1,400. Total 10,400 yuan. Eli pressed his fingerprint with shaking hands. Then Ethan counted the money through the machine. Swish, swish, swish. Every note snapping through the counter sounded like a hammer hitting the villagers' hesitation. Ethan handed Eli the cash in a document bag. Eli hugged it to his chest and dropped to his knees, thanking Ethan like the man had pulled his family back from a cliff.